Welcome to the Connection Central Industry Podcast, where real conversations meet real strategies. Each episode we dive into the industries that keep Australia moving, talking with the leaders, innovators, and everyday operators, shaping what's next. So settle in, turn it up, and let's get into it.
Good morning, everybody. Michelle O'Hara here from Connection Central. We've got a really interesting guest today. I'm very lucky to have Paul Martin from Summerland Camels. Welcome, Paul.
G'day, Michelle. It was
So good. And it's so good to have you because for our industry podcasts, this is a bit different. So what I'd really love for you to do, Paul, is start by sharing with our audience a little bit about what you do, how you got here, just about Summerland Camels.
Yeah, well, it's just coming off the latest, winning the latest dairy award is quite timely. So with our Camel Milk. But I suppose taking it back probably to 10 years ago when we started this project, basically my background was in beef. I was really passionate about expanding regenerative agriculture in the beef industry. And I suppose pitching that idea to investors at the time, there was a camel cull going on and that we were shooting all these camels in Australia. And we'd actually used camels in a grazing situation to see how camels could eat the weeds and help add biodiversity to the landscape, plus our grazing enterprise. And they have this bacteria that helps cattle be more efficient. So that was sort of our touch with camels probably 20 or 30 years ago. Whereas, and then it popped up, why can't someone do something about camels in Australia? And we probably ignored it for about 4 or 5 different meetings we had with investors, especially from the UAE and Saudi, and we ended up doing up a model, an investable model, because we looked at it and said, well, dairy intolerance is a massive thing, and camel milk is the only mammal milk that people can have that got dairy allergy. So we thought, well, that's interesting. So, there was some milking happening over in the UAE, and we thought, well, why can't we actually do that here? So we modeled it up into an investable type project, and then started 10 years ago. Couldn't get the Saudis and the UAE on board at that time, but the aim was to build the project and then actually get the revenue going. So we started harvesting feral camels. Started milking. Started with a bit of cosmetics because it's Cleopatra's bath milk was camel milk. It was leveraged by the dairy industry as a milk-based soaps. I think when we were kids, but it was actually camel milk when you think of what they were doing with it. So all the ingredients in camel milk are very good for the skin. So we did those projects, and goat milk got a foot in the door with people with eczema and things like that years ago, and sort of started off with the soap, and then now have half the pharmacy is full of goat milk products. So camel milk is that next step up for people who have even allergies to that. So we started there, and then as we expanded the dairy and grew the size, we moved to a new location where we are now at Summerland, and started increasing milk yields, getting the milk out there. I think it was $50 a litre in Sydney when we started 10 years ago, so it was for people with probably treating, kids on the spectrum. It helps with gut inflammation, things like that. So that was the market in Australia. And then I think it's grown since then into, particularly with a lot more Somali and Arab communities in Australia now trying to link back to their roots. Having access to camel milk has become quite a big thing in Australia. It's expanded from there, and we linked in the tourism. So we're 45 minutes from Brisbane, an hour and a bit from Gold Coast. Picking this location was ideal to try and educate the market on camel milk, because 10 years ago people weren't Googling camel milk for autism or camel milk for dairy intolerance. So it was I suppose using the attraction of the animal to lure people in, and then get them interested, and then ask the questions, and then take them on farm tours, show them what we do. COVID hit in the middle of that, which sort of probably added a little bit of petrol to that paddock to plate style thought process that people were wanting to know where their food comes from and get out of the city. We're in the scenic rim, which is probably one of the leading regions to promote paddock to plate. So that was probably a bit of luck moving into this sort of region as that. So we piggyback on a lot of that, but we're in a region where people are looking for things to do. And we're surrounded by around 1,200 schools that we can also leverage off for education and, whether it be regenerative agriculture or paddock to plate style, selling right through to retail products from ag. So that's sort of how we started and where we sort of trickle through to today.
Nice. Well, you're ticking a lot of very relevant boxes there in regards to the health gut, to the allergies, to Cleopatra's skin. Okay, that's it. I must have it,
Yeah.
as well as everything else. Wonderful. So, what are you finding now? How are you being, obviously, with the fuel prices, etc.? How are you being affected? How's the industry being affected now?
Yeah, so it's been I mean, anyone who's been in small business in the last 10 years has sort of, I suppose, dealt with some of the challenges and a lot of the things that, people I suppose, aren't aware of that, because COVID really hit the packaging style of our market. So we package all our cheeses, we into glass jars and bottles for our vodka. And so all those little things all of a sudden, just doubled or weren't even available. So we had a little period there where we had to convert to plastic. We've come back to glass now. The war in the Ukraine really affected oil prices. So as far as canola or olive oil, all your agriculture oils that we marinate the cheese in. So all those little ingredients, rennets and things like that. So they all massively increased on the back of that sort of war. And then I suppose the latest one is, in it, mix into that a few floods and fires in this region. So, we, which don't really affect our business from a flooding does, but what it does is sort of, I suppose, the weather channels now trying to capture audiences, with their marketing of extreme events. So I think the world has potentially ended about 27 times in the last 7 years. So, it's these world-ending events that, and people don't leave home. And the effect of that when nothing happens, and I suppose is a challenge to a lot of tourism businesses that are, when this to capture media, they've got to really, double down on how extreme these supercells are going to be and all the rest of it. And, whereas in our day, they were, scattered thunderstorms. So, that affects a tourism business because people don't come out. So, and then I suppose the latest fuel crisis is, we probably haven't felt the edge of that yet because of the, going from, $1.50 to $3, affects, we have probably, we've sort of had to cancel Sydney and Melbourne deliveries. So milk going out's a big challenge. So, and we do a lot of door-to-door deliveries, and that's become unviable overnight. So transport companies are starting to look at solutions. So we're for probably the first time in a long time, people are trying to fill trucks. So there are some solutions coming out of what's happening at the moment. I think the challenging side is going to be on the feed side, where because of the extended dry in the region, going right down to New South Wales and all the rest of it. So where you drag your hay from, so that affects us on the ag side of the, so the initial impact for us is on our retail and distribution side, but the real effects down the track are going to be, people not planting crops because it's just not viable because there's no fertilizer, there's no, and particularly in regions that are dry now, because if I'm a farmer sitting down in New South Wales with no reserve moisture in the ground, I'm not having to spray weeds, I'm not having to spend money. My chances of getting a decent fall of rain to fill that profile and guarantee a crop are probably in the 50-50 range. Going on holiday and just doing nothing seems like a good idea at the moment for a lot of those farming regions. And as long as they've got their bank on side, but their chances of pulling a crop off with no subsoil moisture in the ground are fairly minimal anyway. So, I think, we're not going to see that for 6 to 8 months. So that could be a big shock coming through the system where farmers just don't choose not to plant because the risks are too high.
Wow. Oh my goodness. It sounds a bit stressful actually. So just a business question. When you're coming up, obviously it sounds like you're very good at thinking ahead. Like you can foresee these challenges. How do you personally sort of go about looking at all of that? Like what's the thought process that you go through to help you, I guess, first of all, not get into a doom and gloom. It would be very easy to get fully depressed and, curl up in a fetus position and give up. So, how do you
Yeah.
sort of keep going? And then I guess I know with a lot of other industries, we're finding collaboration with other industries, etc., is the way forward. So when you talked about, you can't get your deliveries to New South Wales and local, like, are you finding that you're having conversations with other producers, the delivery guys? How are you handling all of that?
Yeah, so that's where probably the challenge comes in. I think with things happening so fast and
Mm,
prices need adjusting and your retail prices need adjusting, which affects your wholesalers, your customers. So the amount of admin that creates can often take you off your eye off the ball and sort of stop having those collaboration type meetings because you're just dealing with
mm,
so much sort of in your face sort of problems that you've got to sort out. Yeah, that's sort of why we chose to sort of drop some of our deliveries just for a few weeks, just to sort of settle the because you're sort of losing money on them anyway. So you really go, well, right, let's just pull up a bit and recalculate. I suppose the looking ahead, we've also developed a meat side of the business, and I mean so we've opened that side up. I mean the drive, I suppose, comes from probably our ethos at the start is how do we do something for camels in Australia, and it's they're not they're not seen as livestock in Australia because they were taken off the livestock register in the 1930s because they were of a whole myriad of industry. We could have an old podcast on that particular reason. But so that was why they were let go in the wild because they were ordered to be shot. And then they've sort of just run around and bred up and sort of become a problem around every dry spell. So, even 3 months ago, it was getting very, very dry in Central Australia until those flood rains happened. And I think it hit the media there for about 2 weeks where camels were starting to, water pipes and, break into causing problems and things like that because they mob up into big groups and, can cause a bit of a problem. But when you also think about it is there's no other livestock around because they've all been got rid of 3 years ago because it's so dry. And you think, well, here's this animal just chilling and working its way through, so why aren't we using it? And it's
yes.
for mine, it was all, you could always see the old the old block of land that no one wants because it couldn't fatten any cattle and it was all rough, and then someone sells it for nothing, and the guy who buys it turns it into a gravel quarry and makes an absolute fortune. And I think that's the same thinking, I suppose, around camels is that we've got this animal that is the most adaptable animal on the planet. It can survive anywhere. It only causes a problem 3 to 4 years after every other animal is gone. So how can we utilize it? And it's not easy. It's not if it was easy, it would have been done. But they're not an easy animal to transport. It's probably the hardest challenge. So looking ahead for us, that probably it means our forward planning's got to be a lot better too, because we can't just put our camels on the market tomorrow and sell them as someone in drought might do with cattle. There's always generally a market to sell them. So we've got to be thinking ahead. Yes, we've got some big decisions in front of us where we've got to start to cull the herd, which is never a nice thing when you're trying to build things. But, the reality is the solution before we started was just shooting them anyway. So, we're trying to build, I suppose, people's, and I suppose leveraging off tourism is another upside in this region. So, we're probably going to see the benefit of that in the next 12 months as we did after COVID, because people aren't going to want to drive hundreds of kilometres to go and see something. Whereas here they can, we're an hour or two from the whole Gold Coast. So that helps us from a revenue basis. So I can see some positivity in the tourism side. And that's why we sort of tied the both together, because it's sort of, one can sort of help the other, even though that creates a whole myriad of problems with financing. So that's, again, podcast 3 can be about
Series.
our bank's view on tourism and agritourism when
Mm.
yet it's something that we're promoting so strongly, yet there's no real financial backing behind that. They don't see it as an alternative revenue stream.
You're very positive. But I do like your advice, sort of that sort of stepping back to go forward. That sounds, really, really smart advice. So camel meat, we can eat it? Yes?
Yeah, so I mean, it'd be one of the certainly it's a premium product in places like Malaysia,
Yeah.
obviously in Saudi, Somalia, all those places. Probably running a little second beyond. It's probably the premium product, whereas goat's probably the staple in a lot of those markets. Whereas if you're having a wedding or some sort of celebration in those communities, having camel is their sort of us buying a Wagyu steak or
I
whatever
see.
to present to our guests or whatever it might be. So it's certainly seen as premium in those, and Australia is the only country in the world that has a disease-free status that has camels, which is another big tick to going, well, we can actually take this product anywhere. And when you look at, I suppose, the biggest suppliers of camel milk powder are basically in the UAE, which potentially has a lot of challenges ahead of it in the next
Yes.
number of years with what's going on over there in regards to water supply and
Everything.
our operations are pretty well up in the air at the moment in those regions. And that's where most of the camel milk powder comes from. We'd be certainly a solution for a lot of those markets that are chasing it as a product in somewhere like Australia.
Well, that's good. So opportunity there. So the percentage of export versus in-home supply?
Yeah. So at the moment, I mean, our only real export other than online, so it'd probably make up from an e-commerce point of view, it's probably about 20% of our business, which is through basically e-commerce, which is our milk powder, a bit of skincare, milk powder mainly, and then our cheese was going over to the US quite regularly in the last sort of 5 years. It won an award over there, got second in the World Cheese Awards in the States this year. They ran, and yes, it's great to see the product being seen as a high quality product that we've been able to get out of these animals. And I think they've got with both milk and meat, there's probably wool as a sidekick, but not so much. But there's no reason why it doesn't offer a solution as people are trying to get biodiversity into their revenue streams, but also into their agricultural systems. So rather than having monocultures and just having all sheep, all cattle, or all camels even, so there's a way there that they can be used if there's a market. So our aim is to build that market, and then hopefully other producers will get on board as well. So it opens up, once people see it can be done, and that was our aim. Well, certainly it was my aim to sort of show it can be done, show we can use these animals, how it can, and then basically, hopefully in 100 years, people look back at a strong, thriving camel milk industry, and we've been able to sort of sow that seed.
Oh, how wonderful. So in hindsight, Paul, would you say the move from beef to camel was a good move?
Financially, probably not. At this stage, I
Legacy
mean,
wise.
again, we're early stages, but that was what we knew it was going to take a bit of time to build. I mean, we had a substantially sized beef operation, and certainly I had a passion to take that regenerative ag into the corporate. Was my goal at the time, and then this opportunity came up, which it was certainly a challenge. And I think probably some of the things that you look back and you overlook. I think the very, very hard to when you look back at the history of camels and why camels weren't used. There's an whole embedded racial issue there, and behind that, and it's it's a harder thing to break down than you think. Like even in this day and age, that level of, I suppose, built up they used in the 1800s. It was basically, I mean, camels were 12 times more efficient at moving goods and services than a bullock team or a horse team, because they could go without water for up to 30 days. If the wagon got stuck, you could put it all on the back of the camel and take it out. There was so many ways those animals could traverse off the tracks and go around. And Cunnamulla was, there's hundreds of people saved in the late 1800s when it flooded and no one could get there. And basically those people would have all perished if it wasn't for a string of camels that got food to those regions. So there's a whole, but it was basically a way, politically, the Transporters Union held the bullock teams and the horse teams, and the Cameliers tried to join, but because they were obviously Punjabi people, they were, dark skin. They didn't, there was this whole battle in the early days. So that was then constantly used as I suppose, a media thing at the time. They're taking our jobs. They're, and you still see it today. So whenever someone wants a media bite, it's not hard to incite a bit of activity, which you certainly see in a few of our political parties at the moment, where, if someone's, let's go to the lowest common denominator and, fight the people who can't put up for themselves and let the big end of town run the show, So it's that was tougher, and it's still tough today. I mean, but it is so rewarding to see, people in their 70s that are, and they don't know why they hate camels. It was just something they've dragged through from their past. Oh, they stink, they smell, they were linked to something they hated. They don't know. Their parents hated them for some reason. But, and I suppose that, and then they come and they go, geez, they're not the animal I thought they would be, and I think that's one of the most rewarding things, is to see the joy that people get out of interacting with camels in this type of environment. We have to be very gentle to get milk out of the camels, so we can't do the old school of wrestling them on the ground and putting nose pegs in them and making them do what we want them to do. So it's very much a world of coercion here, and trying to get the animals nice and calm and relaxed, and they're grass eating Labradors in their own environment. When they're not a flighty animal, they're very, very keen to be up and have a pat, and that's what I suppose makes them such a great animal to have outside our cafe. And makes it a bit challenging when people are eating the hamburger, but again,
Yes,
so but
like banging.
that's our real world. You can't say the only animals that we have and livestock that we have and are because we can consume them in some way. So it's and it's the reality of the world. So we've got to find a market there, and and that's probably, meat might have been a quicker way to save camels, which sounds a very odd thing to say, but having a domestic meat supply gets a lot more people involved rather than just one dairy. So, and then a lot more farmers can be involved. A lot more people could be running camels for a meat supply, which then would allow you to probably add levies in there, which then could create an industry body. So we need an industry body to then lobby the government to say, well, this animal needs to be back as livestock. So, so there's a pathway there, but it's, we're edging our way, but it's, there's only so many things you can do at once.
Oh, you're definitely the right person for it, that's for sure. And I love the fact as well, you mentioned 1,200 schools around you. So the fact that obviously you're tying in with them and the kids are coming, I'm assuming, for days out, etc., to educate them, hopefully will also change that perception of, because poor camels sound very misunderstood.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's the key, is just that education points, and they're anywhere from uni students to right down to little kids. So we've got 7 master's students at UQ now studying camel milk that weren't doing, that there was none 10 years ago. So they're, studying anything from cheese yields to, the proteins in the milk for the, there's a lot of more research now on, why it's so good for diabetics and, and all that sort of stuff. So, we're now promoting, I suppose, just being around the longer you can stay around and stay viable is, you're starting to get other industries interested in what you're doing. And that starts to, and that's the big tick for us is, we're starting to supply powder to products that people are making. So, that's, it's now becoming a key ingredient to some of the milk powders that are going out of the country into Asia. And so we've got a whole range of products there based around that milk powder that'll be the growth going forward, and our export into the US, hopefully in sort of 12 months' time.
Oh, that's fantastic. And just something I'm interested, how did you get the feral camels in the first place?
Yeah, so when we were, I suppose the camels we used to get for our grazing industry, you'd either get a road train out when they were mustering in the desert, or, a lot of those camels sort of go into northern Queensland, sort of Richmond, Ewan, they use them for weed control up there. There's a Parkinsonia and prickly acacia are a big problem they were brought in to give shade for the sheep, and then got out of control because the bore drains come in and all the rest of it. So they're a plant that camels love. People they're wanting to go organic in those regions. So the growth of organic markets has meant looking for alternative animal to eat those things. So, and again, the only challenge they have is that when it gets dry, they need to destock. So, they need a market. They need a meat market that's there
Didn't move them
consistently.
through.
So that's why, the if we can grow that sort of regular meat market where they can sort of turn those animals off, then, they will run a consistent herd of camels, no problem, which then allows anyone to start up a dairy or, other things. So, we're certainly doing a lot of work on the genetics. So we're trying to identify high yielding camels within the camels we've got. So that's work that we've been doing for the last 10 years. So we're starting to see progeny come through that are from our higher yielding camels, which we haven't sort of been able to test yet, but that's sort of, another interesting data that, and again, it's just all stuff that the dairy industry did 200 years ago and have been still working on today. So we're trying to, overlay what's already been done. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but just do it with camels, and the same with the product base, of supply a really good alternative for people with dairy allergies. So, yeah, it certainly doesn't lack interest in the,
Eating. It's amazing. I'm just learning so much. And you glazed over it very quickly in the beginning, the dairy award that you
yeah,
just won. So can you please just go into that a little bit deeper for us? Because congratulations.
thank you.
What was
Yeah,
that?
so it was only last couple of days ago. So we were we have won the best non-bovine milk category a couple of times, and our cheese has gets sort of pretty well gold is our standard for the cheese. So you get so many points, you get gold, silver, or bronze. But the milk also obviously got enough points to be the overall winner of the show of all dairy products. So, that was a bit of a surprise, but, it's always up there in the mix. But, to win over all other dairy categories was fantastic. So, it's great. You can't make a gold medal winning cheese out of a bronze medal winning milk. So, it's great that the base product is right. So, it helps us with our gelato and our cheese and our other products. So, it gives us plenty of scope that, those products could be possibly a little bit better. But, we're only talking decimal points here, when something between silver and gold, it's not it's a very good range of products that you're up against. I mean, it's Australia's best cheeses and milk and gelatos, and, there's some amazing people in there that can produce some amazing products. So, but it's great to be up there in those awards, and just to see that, and just to show that it's it's a good product deemed by people who are, completely third party to the operation. And we just got to start. We've got to get our the one we got to get up now is our vodka from bronze to gold. So that's the next one.
Now you're talking everyone's language.
Yeah, yeah. So we do make a vodka out of our whey that's left over from the cheese. We don't intend to waste a lot here. So
Waste.
yeah, so it's quite a novel, bit of a more of a novel product, but again, it helps us with the price point of the cheese. So that, the milk is quite an expensive product to get out of the camels, and then when you make cheese out of it, it just helps with that price point, because there's only so much you can put on a product. I mean, obviously if it's it's caviar and there's a massive demand, you can put whatever you want on it. But we're still an unknown product, and it sort of helps just to sit your retail price in amongst the other cheeses of its type, and then making a vodka out of the rest of it certainly helps us absorb that, that cost. So anyway, if the world all turns to the end, we've got cheese and alcohol
Yeah,
and an
we right.
animal that can survive most things. So we
And you
can't
won't
leave
starve.
very fast, though. They don't exactly travel that quickly. So we're hanging in here for the long time.
No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Look, we've come to the end. This has been so amazing. So what I do want to just end on, Paul, is how can everybody who's listening to this, how can they best help you guys, going forward with the camel industry?
Yeah, so I think our certainly supporting our products is the easiest thing. I mean, we raise capital at times, and we've done a bit of crowdfunding of late to allow a lot of the people that follow us jump on board and become sort of shareholders of the company. So and we're looking for bigger investors now to take it through to the end. So and when I say the end, we're basically taking this to its full production. So we milk about 100 camels a day. We're looking to put about 400 camels a day on this site, with then rolling that. Once that demand is there for that powder, we'll then roll those dairies out around Australia. There's sort of at sort of 500 to 1,000 head dairies. The whole and at that point we'll probably float on the stock exchange, and so the aim is to really put Australia on the map as a producer of clean green camel milk powder. And behind the scenes on that'll also create a nice domestic supply of camel meat. So no one will have the excuse that there's no market there. So we'll build that. So, and buying our products online, you can sort of support our retailers. So that's one way we're, trying to get around the freight things now, is actually go into store in bigger volumes rather than going in supporting those stockists that we have in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. So that's our strategy. Sort of now we've got to this level, and we've got enough. We've sort of got hit that sort of 3 million in revenue of camel milk products in the market. So it's sort of, we're now at that point of sort of scaling that, busting through that sort of barrier and getting the products out to everyone on a day-to-day basis, which would be great.
Magnificent. This has been one of my favorites, Paul, I have to say, because can't wait actually for us to get this out there, and we'll make sure we put all your details in the post as well, so that as many people can learn about the camels and learn about this amazing industry, because you're creating an amazing legacy here. So thank you so much for today and for sharing, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, hopefully we see a lot of the people that listen come out and see us and have a taste.
Sounds great. Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you. Thanks, Michelle.